When it comes to choosing a perspective for your novel, there are some strong opinions out there. I've heard people refer to first person as childish.
A truly skilled writer uses third person.
But I've heard people call third person old-fashioned and too detached.
First person is the only way to really get inside a character's mind.
And I've heard people call second person flat out annoying. It's okay for a short story, but not for a whole book. You might have a strong preference for one particular POV as a reader or a writer, and that's totally fine. Personally, I think it just depends on the story you're trying to tell, because there's a lot more to writing in different perspectives than just switching up the pronouns. Think about the effect that the angle of the camera can have on a scene in a movie. What are we trying to get in the frame? What are we focusing on? What's inside of the frame and what's lurking right outside of the frame? In today's Writing Workshop Wednesday, we're using the camera analogy to better understand the differences and the pros and cons of first, second, and third person. We'll follow that up with a quick writing workshop activity you can use to find the right POV for your novel. So are you ready? Let's get started. First up, first person. In first person perspective, the protagonist is behind the camera and the reader is experiencing the world through her eyes. This point of view is limited to the character's experience, and that includes her opinions, her worldview, and her biases. It also includes her postulates, those deep-seated beliefs that may or may not be true. A good first-person narrator draws the reader into her headspace. Even if we as readers don't have anything in common with this protagonist, we sense that they're real and we understand where they're coming from, so we understand why they make the choices they make throughout the story. So in this example, the main character's assumptions of what is true changes twice within the course of just a few lines. She starts out declaring that she's being followed as a matter of fact. Then she realizes she's just being paranoid, implying that she was wrong. Then she finds what is clearly an ominous note, suggesting that she was right all along and she is in fact being followed. The voice of this character really comes out in the line about noticing a misshelved book and almost having a freaking heart attack. As readers, we understand that she's speaking in hyperbole. She's not actually about to have a heart attack. And aspects of her personality are revealed to us. She loves books, she spends enough time in the library to understand the shelving system, and she's more horrified at the idea of a misshelved book than she is at a potential stalker lurking in the stacks. And the line, "What was this librarian thinking?" is addressed to the reader because in first person, the protagonist is aware of the camera. Some books take this even further, where the main character speaks directly to the reader as you. But most first-person narrators are more indirect. It's part of the conversational tone. This isn't the main character's thought process. It's telling a story with the understanding that there is an audience there to hear it. Now, let's look at the same scene in third person. So this scene shows a different perspective. For one thing, the main character can't hear the footsteps, but the reader is aware that the footsteps are there. The main character's over-the-top reaction to the misshelved book isn't an indirect comment to the reader. Instead, the narrator observes that the main character lets out a gasp worthy of a B-movie star. That's probably not the way the protagonist would describe her own actions, but it does give us a sense of her personality from a slightly more detached perspective. Real quick, yes, I probably could have just swapped out the pronouns and not made any of these other changes. But I want to highlight some of the things you can and can't do in these perspectives. And the one really interesting difference between first person and third person is that in first person, we understand that everything this main character is telling us is colored by their opinions and their biases. They might even be outright lying to us, like with unreliable narrators. It adds a layer to the reading experience because as a reader, you're constantly looking for objective reality through the lens of the protagonist's subjective view. But in third person, when we get a glimpse of the main character's internal thoughts, those are her actual unfiltered thoughts happening in her head. She's not telling us what she's thinking. She's thinking it and we're seeing it. Because unlike our first person protagonist, our third person protagonist is unaware of the camera. So in third person omniscient, the narrator knows everything, every thought, every action, everything about every single character. This narrator is more distant. In third person limited, we started out with the line, "Someone is following her." As with our first person example, this is stated as a matter of fact because the main character believed it to be true. But in this omniscient example, the narrator tells us she suspects someone is following her. Because in reality, our main character doesn't really know whether or not someone is actually following her. And of course, with the omniscient narrator, we can hear the thoughts of other characters and see the entire scene. The camera is as far back as it can go and everything's in the frame. Now let's look at second person. The camera's all yours. Second person is intimate, maybe too intimate. It can be almost claustrophobic. And it's really great for like a horror novel or a suspense novel where you really want to ramp up the tension and make the reading experience uncomfortably visceral. Think about those found footage films like The Blair Witch Project. It's that same shaky, unsettling feeling. Second person is also in some ways the most limiting of all the POVs. You can only see what you see. You can only think your own thoughts. And that layer of work the reader has to do with first-person narrators in trying to discern factual truth from what the protagonist believes or tells us is true is stripped away. So how do you choose the right POV for your story? It's true that some genres have a sort of standard POV. For example, many epic fantasies are third-person limited or omniscient in past tense because that works best for ensemble casts set in big sweeping worlds, and it has this sort of classic storytelling feel to it that gives us a sense of destiny or inevitability. Dystopians and post-apocalyptic stories are often told in first-person present because that lends this sense of immediacy and urgency. It feels like the events are unfolding as we're reading them and the ending is not set in stone. But of course, there's always exceptions. A fun way to pick a POV for your story is to try to direct a scene from your book in your mind. What choices are you making with the camera? Where do you want to zoom in? What do you want the reader to see? And what do you want to keep hidden out of the frame? That more than genre can be an indication of which POV is right for your novel. Time for today's writing workshop activity. Choose a scene from the book you're currently working on, or if you're not currently in the middle of a draft, choose a scene from a book that you really love. Now imagine you're a director and you're about to shoot this scene in a movie. Think about the choices you would make with the camera and the directions you would give to the actors in order to capture what's happening to the protagonist on the page. Now, rewrite that scene twice, each time in a different perspective. So if your scene is written in first person, rewrite it in second person, and then rewrite it in third person. Remember, this isn't just about swapping out the pronouns. Obviously, you can do that. You're the director. You're going to make choices. Try to do something different with the camera in every shot. Zoom in, pull back, close in on another character, try a different angle. Your scene should still hit the same beats, but let yourself play with all the other elements. You'll end up uncovering layers to this scene that you might not have realized were there. If you do this exercise, please post your results in the comments below. I would love to check them out. That's it for today. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe down below. Until next time, keep writing.